Alright, so today I'm making a video that will explain and show one of the main ways you can spot depression astrologically in someone's birth chart. What can just make someone just naturally just feel very sad all the time, or very angry and irritable and depressed all the time. So it involves the moon in our chart, and additionally, it involves the ninth house, but mainly the moon. The moon in our birth chart, it represents our mind and our emotions. And the moon is naturally associated with Cancer in the fourth house. Cancer is a water sign, and water is easily manipulated and can easily be contaminated, just like our mind. So when the moon isn't well placed in our birth chart, then that will reflect on the surface, and the way we think and the way we feel can become very, agitated and irritable and depressed and stuff. And mainly in Vedic sidereal astrology, they use things known and called as yogas. Yogas are planetary combinations in one's chart that produce certain effects. And one of them sort of deals with the moon. A lot of them deal with the moon because the moon is very important in Vedic sidereal astrology. So the name of this yoga that I'm about to read straight from this book and then give you my own interpretations is called the Kema Druma Yoga. Now the definition of it, most of these definitions of the yogas are greatly exaggerated and are not to be taken so literal. You just make your own implications from them, but they're very dramatic and over the top and not to be taken literal. But one of the definitions of this yoga, Kema Druma Yoga, Kemadruma yoga, if you want to go Google it yourself, is stated: one born in Kema Druma Yoga, though born in a princely race, becomes obscure, inimically disposed, miserable, reproached, and bereft of intelligence and learning. The other one, it says, given to base ways, wickedly inclined, one falls from his religion, one is reduced to a penury and perils, drudging as a menial and wandering, as well as deprived of livelihood, wife, children, residence clothes, friends, food, and drink. The native will suffer extreme difficulties, sickness, and filthiness. That's the end of the yoga. Now, how does this yoga become formed? Well, it's really rare for someone to get the exact 100% qualifications of this yoga, but still we can see ways of someone's moon being very irritated and that person being very irritated and depressed in their life. So the qualifying definition of this yoga is when there is no planets, the second or 12th from the moon in your chart. For example, if you have moon in the second house in your birth chart and there is no planets in the first or third house, then that's one of the first steps that you need for this yoga to be qualified. The next step is that there's no benefic aspects looking at the moon. If there is no benefic aspects looking at the moon, and if there is no planets, ultimately the 12th and 2nd from the moon, and if there is no planets directly sitting across from it, in other words, there is no planets to 7th from it, like if you got moon in the 2nd and there's nothing in the 8th, then you have this yoga. Now you can have the sun in the 12th and 2nd from this moon, but the sun doesn't really count. But you can have the sun in the 12th or 2nd. The sun being there as a planet or whatever doesn't count. You'll still have this yoga. So it's almost impossible for nobody to have a moon in their birth chart where there's no planets in the 12th or 2nd from it, or for them to have no aspects of any planet on the moon. But before we get get further explaining that the reason why the moon would be very depressed in this position is because the moon is a very sociable planetary body. It stays in a sign for 2.5 days. It is constantly moving from sign to sign. And in Vedic sidereal astrology, the moon mythologically is very flirtatious because the moon spirit, Chandra, or aka Soma, took the wife of Jupiter and got her pregnant, and there was this huge war about it. But the moon is very flirtatious and very sociable. So it likes to be around people and deal with people and flirt and mingle. But when it has nobody near it, when it doesn't have no neighbors and no one's looking at it, well then the moon is like an orphan. The moon is by itself and the moon is very sad. So the moon, it needs to have planets sitting next to it. And it needs to have planets looking at it. Now, there's a whole lot of exceptions to this yoga. But like I said, that's why I spell out the yoga so y'all can go look it up for yourself. But there needs to be at least some type of benefic aspect upon your moon. If you just have nothing but malefics looking at it, well then that can still be a very terrible and uncomfortable position for your moon to be in. The malefic planets are the moon, Saturn, and the North Node and South Node, aka Rahu and Ketu in Vedic sidereal astrology. They're malefic planets, which means these are planets who are like evil in nature and have, like negative qualities associated with them. So, and the moon is like a blank piece of paper. It's like a chameleon. It can easily be influenced. It can easily be changed and adapt to its environments and surroundings. So when there's no benefic planets looking at the moon, and it's just sitting between, malefic planets. Like you just, for example, I keep using this example. You got moon in like the second house or the third house. You got moon in the third house. And then you got Mars in the second. And then you have Saturn sitting next to it in the fourth. Well, the moon feels uncomfortable because the moon it has two neighbors. Think of it as like literal houses. You're just, I don't know, this good person. I don't know, I can't come up with a great example. But next to you, you got, a bunch of gang members in one house, and you got a bunch of prostitutes or whatever living in one house, and people getting mugged and killed in front of your house every day. And you're like, what the hell did I just get myself into? You feel very anxious, you feel very nervous, you feel very scared, you feel very depressed or whatever. You don't like your environments. You're very uncomfortable. It's like putting the moon in the hood. So when the moon is in an environment like that, when it's just stuck in between two malefic planets, well then a person in their normal life, they can feel naturally very sad, naturally very depressed, naturally very irritable. Now, if there's a bunch of malefics looking at the moon, you got the North Node, you got Rahu and Ketu, or you got Mars and Saturn. They just aspecting the moon from another house or whatever. And there's no benefic planet looking at it, which is Venus, Jupiter, and Mercury. They're not looking at the moon. Well then, this person will definitely be very, irritable and upset and depressed. The moon is being like ganged up on. The moon is being attacked by all these malefic planets. So the moon just feels, like I said, just very it feels very down, it feels very depressed, it feels ganged up on, it feels bullied. It keeps getting robbed on its way to school, getting robbed on its way to work, coming home and all that stuff. So the moon is naturally just very irritable and wants to fight, it wants to kill, it wants to stab someone up. It's walk around like it has a pebble in its foot, in its shoe. So the native, that's how you'll feel. You'll feel very irritable and angry and very reactive and volatile and all that stuff if your moon is like this. It has all these aspects and stuff. So yeah, those are the main two things involving the moon. When the moon is sitting between two negative planets in two houses, your moon is in the fifth and you got Saturn in the fourth and Mars in the sixth, the moon can be very uncomfortable. Or there's nothing but the malefic planets aspecting the moon can be uncomfortable. Now, if there's a benefic planet, just at least one benefic planet looking at the moon, then this yoga, that negative yoga, it falls apart. But still, even though the yoga falls apart, the moon is still uncomfortable. It doesn't matter if Venus is just looking at it, if Jupiter is just looking at it, if Mercury is just looking at your moon. If it's still being gained up on by a whole bunch of malefics, right now, yeah, if it's still being gained up on, then the moon is going to have, it has a companion. It has one friend with it. You could be like Chris from Everybody Hates Chris, and he has a little white friend, and they will both get bullied and robbed. That's sort of the same thing that can happen if your moon is just overwhelmed by negative planets, and it just has maybe just one benefic planet looking at it, and it's sitting with one benefic planet. Y'all just get robbed together. You feel a little bit more better because you have someone to talk to about you being bullied and robbed and share your issues with, but still you feel very uncomfortable, you feel very depressed and hopeless. And other things that can make the moon and make a person very depressed and irritable in life is if the moon is in the sixth house, because the sixth house is everyday conflicts and struggles and trials and tribulations and obstacles and stuff, and the moon is naturally a feminine planet and naturally represents our mother. So when the moon goes into the sixth house, it represents our mind and our emotions and all that. Our mind now has to deal with the everyday conflicts and problems of the world. Think of the moon in the sixth house as like a single parent, a single mother or whatever, who has to take custody of all the kids, and she has to work 2 jobs, do all this overtime. She's barely home. She has to work all these crazy hours to make sure that her family is straight, to keep a roof over her head. She has no support. She's taking on everything on her own. She's changing her tires on her own. She's taking the car for an oil change on her own. She has to call out from work and risk getting fired to take her kids to the hospital. This moon is very overwhelmed. This moon is very stressed out. So if someone has moon in the sixth house, you can see them show these traits of depressedness and irritability and always reacting and bipolarism. A person whose moon in the sixth house, their mother might reflect these negative traits, since the moon represents their mother. It represents the relationship with your mom. If the moon goes into the 12th house, there's a possibility that you would have a maybe distant or maybe non-existent relationship with your mother, because the 12th house represents foreign lands and isolation and imprisonment. So it's very possible that someone with moon in the 12th house, the mother could have died, or the mother could be in jail, or you just have a non-existent relationship with the mother. Those are some of the possibilities, and that can make a native feel very depressed. But you see, the remedy for moon in the 6th house is that they need to go to the 12th, because opposite of the 6th is the 12th. The moon in the 6th house native, they'll need to get that isolation. They need to spend time alone and all that good stuff in order to get away from the hustle and bustle and the stresses of the world. And that moon in the 12th house person, they might run to the 6th house. They might, in order to escape from their depression, they might want to work extra hours at work. They might want to keep themselves busy to keep their mind off of the, whatever tragedies or loneliness or isolation that they could be experiencing, because the 12th house is a sort of a lonely house, especially if there's, like I said, there's no planets beside the moon and looking at the moon. This is a very sad position for the moon, and the native can reflect that, and they might want to go towards the 6th house. This is aspects of the 6th house. They might want to go there and keep themselves immersed and busy with work in order to, keep their mind off of their loneliness and possible depression. Moon in the 8th house. The 8th house deals with death and sex and taboo and occult and inheritances and sudden events, like dying suddenly, sudden tragedies, because death can happen suddenly. And the 8th house is also like a house of termination, of endings and death. Like suddenly getting fired from your job, like I said, suddenly dying, or suddenly inheriting things. Because usually, if you get laid off or fired, you might get inherit a severance package from your job. Someone dies in your family, you might get a will. You might inherit money and property from there. Sex can happen suddenly. So that is what we see with the eighth house: sudden events, sudden tragedies, sudden ups and downs. So this can also be a stressful position for the moon to be in. The moon now has to deal with possibly worry about unknown events, unknown tragedies, and I don't know. I'm sort of struggling to come up with other things to describe the eighth house in a negative sense, but the moon in the eighth house can be a sort of a stressful place for it too. You see, in Vedic sidereal astrology, 6th, 8th, and 12th house are known as the Shanta houses. The Shanta houses are houses that are like have negative characteristics and are like negative in their nature. They can represent death and obstacles and illness and all those type of things. And so planets in those houses can be sort of rough. But of course there's good and the bad, and there's bad and the good. I'm just shining light on the negative qualities a little bit of the 6th, 8th, and 12th for the sake of this video, to prove my point of how you can sort of see depression and stressful positions of the moon in these houses, and how it will reflect depression and irritability for the person who has it. Of course, you wouldn't really see too many of these negative, stressful, depressed characteristics and qualities if the person's moon has a bunch of, positive aspects on it. But if there's like little to no positive aspects on the moon, if the moon isn't in some positive sign, then the person can just feel very stressed out all the time, have a negative relationship with the mother all the time, and just feel very depressed and irritable, want to fight, and just have resting bitch energy all the time. Now, that is just about all the major things that you would see in regards to the moon that would make someone depressed. Like I said, the more benefic aspects on the moon, the better. If the moon has no planets looking at it, no planets beside it, and just nothing but malefics looking at it, then you better believe that this person will always be very emotional and feel very depressed and hopeless about life. It doesn't matter how wealthy this person might be, how great they might be doing financially in their life, and how great of an opportunities they have coming to them. They'll naturally feel very depressed and down. This is why, you see rich people and celebrities get hooked on drugs and kill themselves all the time. Because it's not about the external comforts and luxuries, if you're feeling like shit on the inside. So another thing you can use to see depression in a person's birth chart, even though the moon's the main thing, is look at their 9th house. The 9th house represents how blessed you feel in this lifetime. Your luck, your faith, your connection and belief in a higher divinity, or just belief in anything, politics and whatever and stuff, whatever you believe in. But more so it represents, how blessed you feel, how lucky you feel, the overall wealth you feel, and how fortunate you feel about your life. Someone with a strong 9th house, with like a whole bunch of benefic planets looking at it or sitting in it, this person, they could probably just have, they could live in a hood, live in rough environments, have a rough upbringing, but they might have a positive outlook on life. They might have a positive outlook on life, and they'll still be able to keep this optimism and positiveness to them, while someone else who might have a bunch of malefics sitting in the 9th house or looking at the 9th house, this person, they might feel as though they can't believe in anything. They might feel as though they can't trust nothing. They feel as though they don't believe in politics. They don't believe in leaders. They don't believe in God or any other religions. They don't believe in none of that. They just believe in themselves. They just believe in the reality of what they see due to their messed up environment. Now, the only possible positive side that I can think of a damaged 9th house or a very depressed moon is that it can push a person towards spirituality, towards, learning about maybe tarot and Reiki and astrology. Because the native and the mind can be so overwhelmed with depression that they might want to seek and find a way out of their depression. And they'll start learning and reading and searching for all these alternative methods and ways to obtain happiness. And then they can grow and become a great teacher, because they'll be able to communicate with other like-minded people who felt just as lowly and sad and depressed as them. And they'll be able to communicate in a way that they'll be able to resonate and understand, to help other people who was like them find peace and all that good stuff. So like I said, if the ninth house lord is in an uncomfortable condition, or if the ninth house is heavily impacted by a whole bunch of malefics and all that, then a person, like I said, they can just naturally just feel very down overall about life. They could just feel, like I said, just have no hope and faith in anything or anyone. No matter how, especially in combination with the moon. Like I said, if your moon is damaged, your ninth house is damaged, you'll naturally just feel very depressed about everything. You'll always be a Debbie Downer. Someone can always be preaching to you some good things, try to uplift you, and you'll just shrug it off and one wouldn't care, or you'll get upset that they're trying to give you advice that you didn't ask for. You just naturally just feel very down and irritable and reactive and want to fight all the time and just sad and suicidal and all that good stuff. But like I said, the positive side is that if you don't kill yourself and you don't stay trapped in this loop of depression, you'll want to find and seek a way out of your suffering and all that good stuff. Alternatively, one last bonus thing that can make someone, maybe very irritable and very angry naturally, is if they have the South Node K2 in the ascendant and in the second house. Because what is K2? It's a headless dragon. It's just a dragon who has the body without the head. K2, the South Node, is naturally associated with Mars. Mars is all about weapons and cutting and action and fighting and all that good stuff. Now, even though K2 is very spiritual, what I did by my camera had just cut off at the last few minutes and seconds of that video. But yes. So take the own time to look at your own birth chart. Or look at the chart of someone you know who might always be depressed and sad all the time, or naturally very irritable. See if they have these things in their chart. See if their moon is being looked at by a whole bunch of malefic planets. See if there's a malefic planet in between it, in the 12th and 2nd house from the moon. See if their 9th house has Saturn, Mars, the North Node or South Node sitting in it. See if the Lord of that 9th house is surrounded by malefics. See if the person has possibly the South Node in the ascendant or the South Node in the 2nd house. And it's going to be one of those three things that I just said that will point to the person being very irritable and all the time. Being irritable like that all the time. Now, if the moon is very good, then the person, they'll naturally feel very good. These are the people who are these are the people who are like that coworker at work that no matter how messed up the job is, how bad the day is, they're always in that good mood. And their good mood makes you feel good because they like this ray of light, this ray of hope. That positive, that person who has a strong 9th house and stuff. This is like that person who might just come from, a bad environment. But you never hear them complain about it, or you would never know about it. While you might come from a great surrounding, a great household, but you always complain and bitch all the time. And yeah. So look at these things in your own chart and the charts of other people, and maybe let me know in the comment section down below what is your take on it? How does this resonate with you and the people around you? And thank you for watching this video.